the great crowd gathered here in Parliament Square that has been listening to that service in silence, applauding as they applauded inside the Abbey the words of Charles Spencer, the powerful address on behalf of the Spencer family to his lost sister. And this is the last stage of this journey from London, partly down the route she came an hour or so ago on the gun carriage, this time going back to Hyde Park Corner and then up through North London to the prosaic surroundings of the motorway system, on up to her home at Althorpe House in Nottinghamshire, in Northamptonshire. Applause this time as she goes past. It is very touching, this display of affection that we've seen all week and which reaches its culmination here today. Touching because simple, unaffected. People just marking their respect and their affection and their love for the Princess. We're looking down there at the turn to the left that she'll make, and she reaches halfway down Whitehall, back through Horse Guards. At the west door, the Queen bidding farewell to the Dean, the Duke of Edinburgh there, and the Queen Mother leaving the Abbey, and they are not going to Althorpe House for the committal service and the burial on the island in the lake, though it's thought that the Prince of Wales will accompany his two sons on that journey, along with other close members of the Spencer family. The hearse reaches the Mall, all the way bunches of flowers being thrown before it. All the way down these streets too, people will have heard the service, heard Elton John sing and applauded him. as they now applaud the passing hearse. London has seen many funerals far grander than this, conducted with spectacular ceremonial, but I dare say there has never been a funeral at which so many mourners have been present, at which so many of the people of this country have come to pay their respects, and it's made it unique in a way perhaps that those who said at the start of the week that it would be a unique funeral for a unique person could never have imagined. Estimates of between 1 and 2 million people in the capital city today. The hearse now drives down towards Buckingham Palace itself, where only an hour and a half ago the Queen and the members of the royal family stood as a mark of respect. As drawn on the gun carriage, it went on its way to Westminster Abbey. Over Buckingham Palace, the Union flag still flies at half-mast. When the Queen returns, the royal standard will be hoisted once again. Another of those decisions that was made by the palace in response to public feeling that the princess's death should be more publicly marked by the palace itself. Now up Constitution Hill towards Hyde Park Corner. London bathed in sunlight, the grounds of Buckingham Palace and the lake on the left there. And it's along the north side of these gardens, towards the Wellington Arch in the corner there, that the hearse is now moving, and then it'll go up the side of Hyde Park, along Park Lane. Princess Diana once memorably said that she wanted to be the queen in people's hearts. Perhaps what we're seeing today on the streets of London is the coronation of that queen. It would seem from the words we heard spoken in the Abbey, particularly the words spoken by her brother Charles Spencer and applauded by the great crowds outside, that her influence in her death will be as strong as anything she achieved in her life. Her influence on the monarchy, as the Queen herself referred to in her tribute yesterday, her influence on public life, her influence on the way things are done, and her influence on the many millions of people who saw in her a friend and a symbol of hope and of love that they'd never found before. The hearse now comes up Park Lane, past the grand hotels that line the east side of the street, where Dodi Fayed himself had an apartment, and on up towards Speaker's Corner and Marble Arch. Hyde Park with crowds of people still watching in the warm sunshine, the television set dominating the scene at the left there. Many of them will have gone across to the side of the park, thinning out the crowd there to watch as the hearse goes past. Marble Arch. And round into a short stretch of Oxford Street before her journey takes her due north up Gloucester Place towards Regent's Park and out of London to the north. The crowds in the Mall, now that the processions have passed, with no destination to go, milling around, perhaps going down to Buckingham Palace or back up to Horse Guards. Though there's nowhere left for them to go now, the service and the funeral cortege having passed, I doubt that many of these people will be hurrying back home, perhaps going to look at the flowers at Buckingham Palace, perhaps still with flowers in their hands to lay, perhaps going to Kensington Palace, obviously recording foreign visitors the moment that they were here. And no doubt among many of them are feeling, despite the difficulties of getting here, the cold night that many of them endured, that they have taken part in a great moment of ceremony and expression of appreciation for the life of the princess who so many people love. Flowers striking the bonnet of the hearse as it carries on up Gloucester Place, and where it will shortly pass the mosque, where a funeral service was held on Sunday for Dodi Fayed. The London Central Mosque. Dodi Fayed's death was referred to, a special prayer was said for him and for the driver of the car in the service at Westminster Abbey. And according to the rules of Islam, he had to be buried within 24 hours of his death. There was a brief service at the London Central Mosque with 600 mourners, with his coffin draped in a black cloth with gold lettering of words from the Quran. And he was then taken to Brookwood Cemetery in Woking for a longer private funeral. And this service in Westminster Abbey was carried live on Egyptian television, where the princess has been referred to as the Cinderella of the century. Islamic mourning taking a different form from Christian mourning, being conducted briefly, but then expressed by giving to charity and to charitable events. And there has, of course, been an outpouring of giving to the fund set up in memory of Diana, Princess of Wales. £100 million are said already to have been donated. Tomorrow they're going to apparently give an official figure, but that's what they're saying at the moment. The hearse is now coming into Park Road from Gloucester Place and just approaching the mosque, and will then go on up past Lord's Cricket Ground through St John's Wood.
Then they're going to come back to us secondly in addition. Yeah, hello, hi. Right, okay. Right, okay. Any idea of the duration?
The mosque in the background there, at the corner of one of the entrances to Regent's Park. And still huge crowds here. The people here only catch this one glimpse of the coffin as it goes past, but have come out to mourn just as those who crowded the city of Westminster and the area around Buckingham Palace and Kensington Palace. And the mood hasn't changed. It's still somber and serious and regretful. People have still come with their flowers, and still some applaud. The hearse goes past the hospital where the princess's own father died in 1992. From Wellington Road, the hearse goes up the Finchley Road towards South Hampstead and West Hampstead. And still huge crowds have come out to see it pass. The hearse is now still coming up the Finchley Road towards Swiss Cottage. Strewn with flowers, at sometimes even threatening the driver's ability to see where he's going. So many flowers have been hurled towards the hearse as it approaches. And here the roads divide. One goes up towards Hampstead and the other goes down along to the left towards the start of the original motorway, the M1. They'll go up Hendon Way to Brent Cross, across to Staples Corner. The landmarks here are very different from the ones we've been marking before. This is Finchley Road Tube Station that she's coming towards. And in this part of North London, still great crowds of people have come out, whether they've been watching at home on television first and then come out just to catch this glimpse as it goes through. But there couldn't be a more powerful tribute to the Princess than the sheer weight of numbers of those who've come just to catch this brief glimpse of her hearse as it goes past. Police having to clear a path through the crowd as the outriders approach them. It's almost as though a people's wreath was assembling itself on the roof of the hearse to match the family's wreaths on the coffin within. So many flowers have now been thrown on this brief journey through. We're coming up now towards Hendon Way, and no sign of the crowds diminishing and no sign of the bunches of flowers being either placed in the way of the hearse before it reaches or thrown at the hearse, diminishing either. Some people have said that the reaction to the death of the princess was in danger of engendering a kind of hysteria, but it doesn't seem like that watching today. The people who've come here are not behaving any other than as mourners at a funeral for somebody they loved. The expression may be one that we think is un-British, but quite clearly we were wrong. It's not. These flowers added to the millions and millions and millions of blooms that have been placed all round the palaces with their messages spring simply from people's need to do something, to say, as one of the cards said, "Sorry, Diana," or "Diana, we miss you." The hearse has now just reached the start of Hendon Way, and it's not for much longer here in London that it will go at this pace, because as soon as it reaches the motorway itself, we expect it to speed up on its journey towards Northamptonshire. But there, once it reaches Northamptonshire, it may slow down on the way, of course, for the bridges across the motorway if there are a lot of people gathered there. But once it reaches Northamptonshire and turns off to the right towards Althorpe House, it will slow down again, and no doubt there'll be many thousands of people there too. The family and those close members of the royal family are going by train to Northamptonshire. The Hendon Way, with the traffic on the incoming side, on the right of the picture there, completely stopped. and the left-hand side as the hearse goes up, with people allowed on both sides of the road. Cars having pulled over. And this is what they may have to do on some stretches of the motorway to come, because they're worried that people coming down and seeing the approaching hearse will want to stop and themselves get out and cross the motorway and watch it pass. The outriders having to weave their way through the crowd. The hearse with its windscreen wipers now going to keep the flowers away so the driver can see where he's going, as it seems to have to nudge its way through the great banks of mourners on either side. At times it seems the procession may even come to a halt because of the pressure from those wanting to catch a glimpse of the coffin as it goes past. Now the hearse has reached Brent Cross, the world-famous huge shopping centre for the whole of North London, and also a vast system of confusing interconnecting roads that lead the driver down towards Junction 1 on the M1. On the narrow pavements even here, a place it would be dangerous to stand in normal times. crowds have gathered, and under the flyover on the other side of the street. Traffic halted on both sides of the street. A rollerblader in the carriage beyond managing to keep pace with a hearse as it heads towards the motorway. And so the hearse heads towards the motorway system that will whisk it across the counties up towards Northamptonshire. And still right out here, people have come from all around to find a viewing spot on the bridges, on the flyover, above. Leaving their cars parked and running to the barricade there and looking over, watching this hearse now completely garlanded in flowers. Great showers of flowers there, a cascade from each side. And so the flowered-covered hearse is about to leave the outskirts of London and head off up the motorway. And as it does, we'll follow it from time to time where we have cameras where it perhaps slows down for members of the public. It appears to have come to a halt for a moment, perhaps to clear those flowers from the windscreen. So one last wreath of flowers is laid beside the motorway from all the flowers that have been thrown on the short journey from Westminster Abbey to this point before it proceeds safely on its journey north. And all the way up this motorway, wherever there is a bridge that crosses the road or where there's a junction where people may be able to catch a glimpse, there are already people out. Look at this bridge, completely packed full, a pedestrian bridge or a road bridge across the motorway, packed full. This is at the Scratchwood service station, where they did expect many people because they were able to park their cars there. And that all the way along is what we can expect. And meantime, here outside Westminster Abbey, there are still crowds of people coming out after the service, which we heard, the crowds out here heard all the way through. 2,000 or more people, and a service which pulled no punches, particularly in the very striking address of Charles Spencer, his tribute to his sister, in which he talked most movingly about her troubled life, and then made his own powerful plea for the children. He said he hoped that their souls could sing openly as she had planned. Well, we've been watching here the great crowds as they've been listening to the service, as they've been watching the hearse go past, throwing the flowers. We haven't heard from the many reporters that we have down on the streets, able to talk to people and see how they reacted to the service. Let's do that now, and let's join first of all Krishna Gurumurthy, who was on the Mall.
David, remarkable though those scenes of the hearse passing through the streets are, the atmosphere actually during the service, when it was being relayed on a public address system through the streets of London, was just amazing. From the moment it started up probably until when Elton John sung his tribute, Candle in the Wind, the atmosphere was, although it was so public, it was also intensely private, if that makes any kind of sense. And when Princess Diana's brother spoke so movingly, I don't honestly think there was a dry eye on the Mall. I've spoken to some people since, and that by far seems to have been the most effective, most moving moment of that service, and something people will remember as a speech really spoken from the heart, a very personal occasion and comparable to any funeral one might attend of somebody one really knew.
Excuse me, a slight hitch here. That was Krishna Gurumurthy. And now let's hear from Fiona Bruce, who was talking to people, who's been talking to people who were watching this service on those giant television screens that we saw in Hyde Park. Fiona.
A little like you heard from Christian just there, the atmosphere here during the service was quite extraordinary. It was almost as if the people were in the Abbey when people were singing the hymns in the Abbey, people stood up and sang the hymns here. And when L. Spencer made his very powerful address, some people here were giving a standing ovation. They agreed so strongly with what he was saying. Now, I'm joined here by a number of the people who were in the crowd. Two people here that I spoke to earlier. Now, you've been here. You were here at 2 o'clock in the morning. What were your feelings about the service? Was it worth coming all this way from Ipswich and waiting all this time?
Absolutely, absolutely. What a tremendous day. A day I'll never ever forget. It was just phenomenal being here. And Al Spencer's tribute was so true, so real, and so Diana. Fantastic.
He spoke for us, he spoke for everybody here, for everybody in this country.
Yeah.
His words are what we feel, and he couldn't have said anything better.
What was it particularly that struck you about what he said?
Just, he spoke from the heart, and he spoke from our hearts. He was speaking for us, for every single one of us.
And the fact that he broke down, he struggled to the very end, didn't he? he was determined to finish off his tribute, but you could see he was struggling as much as we were, and that's what we need to see.
And you were particularly moved, I think, by Elton John's
yeah, I'm very
contribution,
moved.
weren't
I
you?
think if you could take this as a performance on the TV, it was a first-class performance from everybody. I really didn't think Elton John would actually get through. Well, you know, he came through with flying colours, and everybody did. I mean, I'll never forget today as long as I live. Very, very emotional today.
You were saying to me earlier that you had probably shed more tears today than you had shed...
When I lost my father 8 years ago. I've never cried so much today like I did when I lost my father. And she's not even any relation. It's like the effect that she has on people all over the world, not just here. Can't put into words, really. It's just unbelievable.
And Elliot, what about you? You're 8. What did you think about the service?
I thought it was very upsetting because
Did you think it was very sad?
Yeah, because she'd done a lot for the homeless and I think she'd done well.
Did you think it was very sad?
We love you and miss you. Love you. We miss you.
Now, you say you've come from Wales today.
Yes.
And there was obviously a reference to Wales in the service.
Yeah.
What were your feelings about the
Well,
service?
I'll share with you a secret, and that was I actually lost my mother at a very young age. I was only a few months old, and that resolved with myself being brought up in a Welsh village. It was named Llannon, very near Aberystwyth. So, as you know, Di, Princess of Wales, was our princess. So obviously the Welsh people, or fi'n siarad Cymraeg, they're, you know, really moved. And as you know, we're going to have a service in Cardiff so that the Welsh people can really come together and have their sort of memorial service.
And was the service what you expected it to be?
Yes, I think the service was just wonderful, and it incorporated all the people, just like Diana, from all walks of life. Like we had opera, the Requiem, so that exposed some people, probably the first time they've ever heard some opera. And then, as we've heard, the Candle in the Wind, I think the whole world knows Elton John. He truly gave Candle in the Wind justice. In Wales, some of us think they misinterpret sort of the English rose. You know, obviously, English rose...
Or you think she was a Welsh rose too?
Well, definitely so. And I think, you know, that's just... She was just the rose of our hearts. And the Queen of Hearts. And always will be.
Now, I know you've been feeling very strongly about this all week. Is there some kind of sense of catharsis, of relief now that the service is over?
I feel numb. I can't honestly think of any words how to describe how I actually feel at this moment. My love and my heart goes out to Prince William and Prince Harry. I lost my mother Joanna and I was the same age as Prince William, and it's tragic, and I can't put into words exactly what it's like. I mean, seeing the crowds here, it's just overwhelming. You walk in and, you know, when you first walked in, the crowds, you'd never feel that again. I don't think you would.
Was it definitely worth coming all this way? After all, you watched it on the screen. You could have watched it on the screen at home. It made a real difference being here, did it?
It's been a very emotional day from first thing in the morning right through till the end now. Yeah. I mean, you could never compare today with anything else, I don't think.
I feel proud and honoured to be here. Do you? Yeah.
Well, thanks very much for joining us indeed. Thanks very much.
And the hearse has now gone far enough up the motorway for us to see it once again as it approaches the Scratchwood service station, where we saw a moment ago large crowds standing on the bridge over the motorway. They've been urged not to drop flowers from that height. This hearse with the flowers still on the roof that it gathered on the way through the streets of North London. Well, some flowers still thrown and applause as it passes, but what a spectacular turnout of people, and there beside the motorway as well, breaking through onto the motorway. A spectacular turnout still, as the hearse continues to head north towards the family home where the committal service will take place later this afternoon, with just the very close members of the Princess's family present. We'll be back, of course, to follow these events. We'll see more of the journey north, and we'll see the hearse as it disappears into Althorpe House later on. More people lined up on the streets there. And we'll be hearing people from here in London and from around the country who've been taking part in services or watching this service. Their reactions, quite clearly, very powerful emotions have been stirred by this service today and by the funeral procession. But for the moment, we go over to Martin Lewis for a bulletin of the news.